At a time when so many AAA titles are rushed out for the cash grab, flung out to the masses with the promise of later fixes that rarely come, at times like these it's rare to find a game which scoffs at such notions. A game like Narcosis, in which we'll have to travel to the depths of the Pacific Ocean to rediscover the forgotten practice of making a game with love and dedication. Join us as we dive, pun absolutely intended, into the story of Kip Matas and how he and his fellow divers reclaim the heart of storytelling through their hours of struggle in the watery abyss. Narcosis is a game with depth. Man, these puns keep getting in the way of a serious review. But in all seriousness, it really is. Not depth of inventory management or crafting systems, but rather a depth of story. One which you probably won't fully appreciate until you've completed a second playthrough. What helps give this story a true sense of authenticity though, and this really can't be understated, is the narration. The survivor recounting his tale sounds just like Tom Hanks, and not a knockoff Tom Hanks either. It isn't him though, instead it's a man named Jeff Matas, who voices his namesake Kip Matas, and who I'm convinced does just a superb job, as if the actual Tom Hanks would have done. But enough about Tom Hanks. Jeff Matas is fantastic at this in his own right. The narration is natural and consists of a good back and forth between our diver and a woman interviewing who's also very good. I won't spoil the context of the interview, not that there's a big reveal or anything, but simply because the game doesn't fully reveal until later on, and since I avoid late game spoilers, I'll stay quiet.
Oceanova was once in a lifetime. They're breaking new ground, making something meaningful. Mining methane hydrate frozen beneath the seabed. There's alternatives, but none so plentiful. It's clean and safe. I couldn't say no.
I recommend buying and playing this game at least twice. You'll likely spend 4 hours or so on the first playthrough, with maybe 2 or 3 on the second. If you're the type who prefers to watch rather than play, then please do feel free to check out our full walkthrough linked above. However, I'd also consider supporting the devs because they've obviously put a lot of attention and time into this game. The game is loosely broken down into chapters, each often starting with snippets of the earlier mentioned interview, giving you a source of exposition that doesn't feel forced or overly spoon-fed. It's a natural and interesting way to help you navigate and understand your surroundings. Those surroundings being a deep-sea mining facility which has just been fatally damaged by a nearby earthquake, measuring 8 on the Richter scale. After a brief and well-done introduction, you're left with only your suit for protection, a dwindling oxygen supply, and an unclear path ahead. The narration isn't a source of instant knowledge though, it doesn't help you that much, and most of the puzzles and platforming needed to be figured out by the players themselves. Nothing is too overly complex here though, with just enough difficulty to offer a challenge, but not too much to detract from the story. However, what can distract from the story, at least in the beginning, is the movement and controls. Now, I totally get that the player is moving around in an half-ton diving suit, meaning it should and would feel clunky at best. But when the game introduces and includes platforming elements like Narcosis does, it can feel a bit frustrating. One part of my first playthrough in particular had me almost giving up and playing something else. That said, to be fair, on my second playthrough I did this particular ledge jumping section, which is now infamous in my brain, and didn't have nearly as much issue with the character movement and the actual platforming elements, so perhaps I was just having a bad day the first time around. I bet I'm not the only one who wishes controlling your character was just that little bit smoother though. I mentioned the introduction being well done, and this again ties in with how naturally everything is introduced in this game. The scene switches effortlessly between present and past, from the bottom of the ocean to the bottom of a swimming pool and back again in the blink of an eye. It doesn't last long and only really registers as a tutorial when looking back in hindsight, partially because of the contrast between locations and partially because there isn't that much to learn, and what there is isn't thrust upon you in lined boring chunks. Graphically the game is decent, nothing amazing, but for a 2017 release game and from a small studio I wouldn't expect it to be. It probably looks better than you'd expect actually with that considered. Environments are varied and interesting, and the character and creature models are solid. I really like the little small details you find dotted around everywhere, be it a post-it note left in a locker or some art or poster around their interiors. There are collectibles to be found which on other games can sometimes be a chore, however with these extra little touches it makes scouring the wreckage for these precious possessions more of a pleasure than an actual chore. Like most things on Narcosis, it just reinforced the notion that genuine love and attention went into making it. I say most things because I didn't like the clunky movement. Have I mentioned that yet? Oh, I have. Well, I'm going to keep mentioning it because it's the only slight in an otherwise beautifully crafted game. Performance-wise, there's some random stuttering around the place, including a section which gave me solid lag for around about 45 seconds, though I'm not really sure why. It did have a sea creature, but so do any other scenes without such lag. It just felt a bit random and popped up occasionally. Otherwise, for the most part, my RTX 2060 GPU was able to play the top settings without breaking a sweat, as you might expect. The audio was good, the score is nice and subtle, barely noticeable for the most part, to be honest. The sound effects and atmospheric ambience seem accurate to the surroundings, and of course the voice acting is great. Narcosis is a game which you might start off indifferent towards, if I'm being completely honest. You might feel some early frustration with the controls, might not like it when a third of your screen is taken up by the visor. If you roll with it though and persist, you'll probably be as emotionally involved by the end as I was. Worth the price of £11, or approximately $14 it's on Steam for, and definitely worth the much lesser price of around £4 or £5 you'll sometimes see it going for on sale. But can we just forget about everything else though, please? I just want to talk about the story. It's really all that matters here. The story and the curveball. You play through this game thinking it's a simple, albeit beautifully told battle of survival, when the reality is something other. Desperately trying to find hope amongst the chaos, you'll progress through the game until at last you find it. You aren't safe yet, but with luck, you might soon be, only to have your whole world come crashing down around you. Not physically this time, of course, but because this whirlwind comes in the form of a realisation. Things aren't as they seem, and you'll benefit from a second playthrough to see the reality which has been before your eyes all along. If I'm making it sound a bit like The Matrix, it isn't. It's a more subtle reveal, a less world-changing one, yet one which is no less astounding in a real human sense. Before all this though, you'll start to have visions. The source of these is of course down to interpretation, the most mundane of reasons being, as you might have guessed from the title, narcosis, the condition which can alter the mental perceptions of a person breathing gases under elevated pressure, i.e. being deep underwater. The more fantastical amongst us might believe a more supernatural occurrence afoot. Either way, they're starting frequently and isolated but become increasingly elaborate and mind-bending as you progress. Late game, you'll question everything, wondering what's real and what isn't, constantly second-guessing yourself and the game. I bet this bit isn't real. Did I do that already? Or have I been down this corridor? Yeah, it really keeps you guessing. Assuming the visions are simply from the brain of the protagonist, they seem to often give away his thought processes. Remember, the narration is from a later time, the man you control currently, the body in the titanium coffin under your orders from WASD. That guy is silent throughout. Through these visions you can build up a picture of the mental torture the man insists upon himself. Bringing us to the best aspect of the game. God, I hate myself for this cornball, but it is the journey. It's the only way I can describe it. Through the journey, this narration, a composed recounting of the events, are occasionally broken by moments of anguish and regret, periods of acceptance, and who knows, maybe even signs of closure. Much of the recount is likely old ground, questions Kip's built up a tolerance to and a rhetoric for. The emotion perhaps comes from a surprise prod from the interviewer, or a walk down a path not yet laid. Perhaps I imagined it, but I could almost sense when the conversation was going over old ground and when they branched off anew. It was really well done. Can't go into too much detail, of course, as that would bring great spoilers with them. However, it's safe to say people die. You learn as much very early on, and Kip didn't. His fault or not, it's the burden he carries. Of course, it's just a game, but occasionally a game will grab me to the extent that for a brief moment, the characters and the world are anything but that. Kip, for a moment, was real to me, and with that, hearing his words as the credits neared the scroll, meant I genuinely cared for this man and his burden he carried. It isn't just a gripping narrative which makes this game, however. There are moments of genuine tension and dread, some decent jump scares, and an all-round creepy atmosphere. It's story heavy, but make no mistake, this is a game capable of scaring you too. Best played in a dark room with headphones on at full blast for full effect. So I hope you did enjoy, guys. If you did, please do like and subscribe. It would really help us out, and of course we'd really appreciate it. Take care, guys. Bye bye.